Hey guys, sorry about the last second pivot here. I clearly still suck at figuring out the live stream, but appreciate you guys joining. The kind of schedule, if you will, for tonight is to obviously when you all have questions, want to talk about whatever, just feel free to drop stuff in the chat. Yeah, sorry, Mike. I don't know what the hell I'm doing clearly. But I have a ton of questions to answer, and I know maybe some people won't be able to join who asked the questions, then that's okay. This will be available afterwards. For those of you who aren't able to watch now but are watching in the future, I'm still going to answer all your questions. But yeah, so I appreciate the pivot. I scheduled something before, and then I didn't have software, and I'm on my work computer, to be fully honest, and I can't download anything. So here we are on kind of the old school version of live streaming. My lighting is ass, but that's okay. So yeah, I guess I'll just kind of like launch into some questions. And I don't know if I can share a screen. Can I? Maybe. Let's see. Because I did create something. It's not great, but just so people can see like what questions are being answered here. You go in the presentation mode, put this over here. All right, let's see if this works. All right, so these are the questions. So I'm just going to kind of start off, and I'll definitely keep an eye on the chat. So again, submit whatever you want. You can talk about whatever. It doesn't have to be questions. You can ask me about anything. It doesn't have to be hiking related either. But so these first round are kind of from YouTube, and I again did not put any previous thought into these, so I'm just going to answer these like on the fly. But I like all these questions. So I'm going to start off kind of out of order. And I'm going to go with Jillian's question here. Which do I prefer, summer or winter hiking? And then second part, what is my favorite hike in that season? So for those of you who kind of follow along, it's probably a pretty obvious answer. I prefer summer hiking, quote unquote. Really, like spring is kind of my favorite time for couloirs and stuff like that. And there's questions about snowpack, which we'll get to later. Winter hiking for me is not it. I hate winter hiking, really, to be honest. It's not about the cold. It's not about the like snow on the ground per se. It's more just like the traveling is so difficult. And so if you have a split board, if you have skis, like you can get to and from places a lot easier. But then also you have avalanche risk. But a lot of the stuff, like once you get kind of above tree line, above a certain elevation, it's so windswept that you can't really travel that way safely, at least, or if you don't want to ruin your skis and boards and stuff. So I try to do like a winter hike every year and make a video. I don't really know what I'm going to do this winter if I'm going to do that, but definitely prefer summer, fall. Fall really is my favorite season. Just because for hiking purely, because that's when in Colorado, at least, the thunderstorms kind of calm down. The days are a lot longer still, and the weather doesn't really shoo you off the mountain as much, which for me is just kind of when you can really do some pretty epic long days. and not worry about your safety as much. And then, yeah, base guys question. So I'll kind of move on to that. So what inspires me to keep climbing mountains? I'm going to answer that before I go to the second part of this question, because I see all these kind of rescues all the time. I think that answer's changed. Like, I used to do things as like a checklist when I was working through the 14ers. That was obviously like check, move to the next. But now I really like to do things that I want to do. And I know sometimes, like, when I make a video, I mean, honestly, it's probably not the best for views or clicks or whatever. And I do struggle with that, because I know sometimes, like, specifically on trips, like, I know where my audience is based. It's a lot of people from Colorado. It's a lot of people, and feel free to shout yourself out in the comments if you're not. But I know people are not from Colorado who watch the videos, but that's really the majority of where my viewers are. And so if I go to like a random place, it's tough sometimes, because, the views are lower, and I don't do things for the views per se, but it's all a lot of work. So, but that's a long answer short of saying that I do what inspires me to keep climbing. Like, I just really like the constant challenge. I like, pushing what your mind and body can do. And I think that really motivates me to just keep kind of exploring places and doing new things. And then the second part of this question, my thoughts on the increase of rescues in the mountains in the winter. So I don't know. For those of you who have been following along for a bit, I have firsthand experience with an accident and a fatality, unfortunately, in the mountains. So it's this answer. Like, I probably had a different knee-jerk reaction to this in previous years, but I think I struggle with this, because, I mean, to be honest, like, my thoughts on the mountains are, whether we all want to admit it or not, the second you leave your house on anything, I mean, going to the mountains or not, frankly, but when you're specifically going out into nature, into a hike, into the mountains, into high elevation, like, you're entering into a risk. And I think a risky situation, I should say. And I think that people kind of take that for granted, because they think, oh, I have more experience, or I've done X, Y, Z, or I have this knowledge, and so I'm mitigating that risk. And maybe, sure, that could be the case. But also, like, there's just so many things that are out of your control that you could know the most about. You could have the best beta in the world. You could have the best technology and gear and all that shit. And stuff can just happen. So I guess my thoughts on the increase of rescues, it's really sad. I think that a lot of people probably don't have a ton of knowledge and just kind of do things. And I also don't think there's necessarily something wrong with that. I think as long as you're kind of doing some kind of level of preparation in advance, like, you gain experience by gaining experience. But I think just like going out and doing something blindly is like a really, really dangerous formula. So I struggle with that. I don't want to judge these accidents. I obviously hear about them. I obviously, read about them. It's very sad. I'm never going to be someone in the IG comments with an avalanche saying, oh, they should have done X, Y, and Z. Like, that's fucking bullshit. I know people who have died in avalanches, and they were very knowledgeable people. So I think as like, winter is definitely a tougher time to go do stuff at high elevation, in particular when there's exposure with snow and cold and added risk. But I don't think that's a reason to stop doing things. If you want to do stuff in the winter, there's definitely safe ways to do that. And we'll kind of talk about that. There's another question, I think, later on that I'll get to, that talks about like how I go into a objective, like what kind of stuff I do. But yeah, this is a long-winded answer of just saying, like, it's sad, I guess. Like, I don't want to see people getting rescued or having accidents at any time of year, especially in the winter. But sometimes there's a way to decrease that risk a bit. Sometimes there's not. All right, Jared's question here. Toughest 13er. Oh my God. This is a crazy ass question. No disrespect, Jared. I don't know if I'm going to answer this fully. I think a lot, like even a lot of when people ask me like, what's the hardest mountain? What's the hardest 14er? There's so much recency bias that comes into that. And there's also, I mean, for those of you who have discovered me or have seen my video on ranking the 14ers, go read the comments and you'll see like hot take city on everybody disagreeing. Any list is subjective to an opinion, especially with hiking. Like so much depends on the day. So much depends on how you feel individually, how the weather is, you know, so many things. But I guess toughest 14er. Yikes. I don't know. I'm not going to do each mountain range. That's crazy. But I'll rattle off a few, I guess. In the Elks, that's where my head kind of goes immediately. I think a lot of people think Capital. I think that's fairly warranted, not because necessarily like the knife edge, but because it's a really long approach. There's a lot of loose stuff on that peak, especially after you get through K2, which is where the knife edge begins. And then after you do the knife edge, you're on the higher part of the mountain, which is just like really crumbly and shitty. And then I guess 13er, one that sticks out to me is one I just did. I put a video out this fall. Yikes, what mountain was that? It was a Centennial Gladstone, I think. It's like right next to the Wilson group there. That one was the first scramble I've done in a really long time. And yeah, it was brutal. Like it was fun, but it was brutal, and brutal both ways. Like I got to the summit. It's a 13er, it's a Centennial. So that's kind of the reason why I was doing it a bit, but also is kind of getting back into scrambling, which I love. And I've had a tough relationship with since the accident that I was involved with. Let me answer this a little bit better. And then other ranges. Let me see. I think in the Sangres, anything in the Chicago Basin, any of those four you could pick as the hardest in that range. The approach is insane. You can take the train, but it's still an insane approach because most likely you're backpacking, or if you're going purgatory in a day, that's like a super epic 50-something mile day. So that would be that. 13ers, I mean, honestly, like I haven't done a ton. I'm not really hunting 13ers per se. I'm kind of working through Centennials as I kind of want to. But generally the 13ers are a lot tougher because you'll have maybe partial trail or in some cases no trail. And so that just makes generally the traveling a lot slower, and you have to be like a lot more engaged with your foot placement. You can't just like have nice cruiser single trail to run or to jog or to hike faster. So, yeah. All right. Before I move on to the next, I'm going to pop into the chat for a second. I see there's some stuff going on here. Yeah, Mike, I respect that so much. Like, I think you know, do it ultimately. Like, people have to do what you want. Like, people have joy in a checklist. I'm not naive. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't have a point where I was like, yo, I got to check these mountains off. You can't see it, but there's a map hanging to my right that is literally a map of Colorado with all the Centennials, I think bicentennials on it, that when I do one, I like check it off. So I still do that a bit, but I definitely more focus on like what's enjoyable for me. I think even like to be fully transparent, there's been pressure in the past where I'm like, I got to put out a video every week. I got to put something out in terms of content all the time. And I've really like taken a step back from that because this will all not exist if I just burn myself out and like get too overloaded on, you know, videos or website posts, whatever. So I think that's a great perspective. Doing a live stream of an entire hike would be absolutely insane. I don't hate that idea. I've actually along those lines, like I've dabbled in a concept of doing something like all shooting it on my cell phone. So I have like less kind of stage shots and just more of like a live experience kind of thing. But I don't know. I've just never really had a good opportunity to do that. Moving to the Grand Canyon soon. Haven't done any hiking there. Any recommendations for the park or the area? Dope. So I've only been to the Grand Canyon three times, I think. So in terms of recommendations for the Grand Canyon, I've kind of done the basics there. So I've been there 3 times. Yeah. I've done like a bit of Bright Angel. I've done river to rim on the south rim, and then I've done the full rim to rim to rim. I would definitely say, like, if you're just starting off, like, go south side of the Grand Canyon. The north is very beautiful, but it's super undeveloped. It's harder to get to, which, for some people is positive. But I also just think from a pure hiking perspective, like, you get to the south rim and you see, for those of you who have been, like, you see right down you see that iconic view that everybody who, like, takes a picture of the Grand Canyon, that's always from the south rim. The north rim, the approach from the river to the north rim is like 10 or 11 or 12 miles. So it's a much more gradual way to, like, work your way up. So I definitely would say, like, looking at just basic hikes, like south rim to river to rim, really good. If you don't want to do it as committing of a day there, you could just do like a bit of Angel's Landing and working your way down. Check out my post. I'll drop it in here at some point once I stop rambling. But there's a side adventure, and I forget what it's called, but there's like a plateau that's not part of the standard rim to river to rim or the rim to rim to rim. That is like 3/4 of the way down. That's absolutely worth checking out. It's really, really cool. So, yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on Grand Canyon quickly. All right. What part of Colorado do I live in? All right. For obvious reasons, I don't really get very specific here with this answer. But I'm in the Front Range area. I'm not in Denver. I drives me fucking bananas when people have negative comments and say, go back to Denver. Like, I've never lived in Denver. I'm not from Denver. And I say for now, because I am thinking of moving at some point in the near future. I generally have no idea, genuinely have no idea what that means. But yeah, that's where I'm at these days. All right. I'm going to do Allison's question on the Bell's Traverse here, and then I'll get back to some pre-scheduled stuff. The new Casa Bonita is sweet. I did check that out. All right. Advice for the Bell's Traverse. You did Crestones and Kit Carson's North Ridge last summer. Hell yeah. Okay. So Crestones, and let me just preface this answer with saying I haven't done the Bells in a minute. I want to go back and do it in a day. I'm really hoping to do it this summer. I was trying to do it last fall, but we'll see. The Crestone Traverse, the biggest difference between the Crestones and the Elks is the rock quality. And I forgot how good the rock quality was until I went and did Crestone Needle again this year. But I say this because, like, the rock quality in the Crestones is just really solid. And just like anything, you have to test your holds, don't just fully commit. But when you're on the Crestones Traverse, like, you get, especially that head wall, which I know you did, so you probably understand, or remember, obviously you have a memory, what that was like. That head wall is like so bomber. It's super exposed. It's really, really exposed. So, like, I'm not taking away from that. But the rock quality itself, like, you can pretty much fully trust it. In the Crestone Traverse, the Maroon Bells Traverse, from what I remember and from the rock quality hasn't changed that much in 5 years. It's just much, much different in terms of the looseness of rock. And that's the Elks in general. It's kind of just like the nature of that entire range. I'm not a geologist, so I can't explain why, but it just is. So I guess comparing those two very directly, both of those you mentioned are in the Sangres, so that Kit Carson North Ridge, super fun as well. But the Maroon Bells Traverse, a lot more route finding. So once you're kind of up Maroon Peak there, and then you kind of start the descent down, that's pretty straightforward. But then the actual traverse from Maroon to North Maroon it's not just like, let me stay on one line and I'll pick it and go the entire way. You have to make quite a bit of decisions along the way. So I would say, like, if you felt good on those two, you'll probably feel good on the maroon bells too. Like, from a difficulty perspective, they're comparable, but it's just the rock quality. And then I would be like really not doing this answer justice if I didn't mention that choice of moves that you have on the Bell's Traverse. I believe it's like 3/4 of the way through, and you basically have a choice between a super ass exposed kind of tunnel, and then a much more difficult, like low class 5 kind of reach up move that you choose between. And so when we did it, my buddy Andrew and I a while ago, we chose the second, so that higher class move. If I were to do it again, I'd probably want to check out the chimney just so I can compare the two, just like memory wise. But yeah, so that's kind of that. All right, I see there's more questions here, but I do want to get back to some of the other ones because I'm sharing my stupid freaking presentation here. But I know some of you are on. So Jen, I think I saw you here earlier. But regardless, so these are some other questions I wanted to get to. And Mike, I know you're obviously here. So how many times has Missy escaped since your last update? Missy is Aria. Aria has, I'm going to knock on wood. She has not escaped since the last time I shared of her escaping. Just like a little behind the scenes. So at my house, I have like a dog run that is very secure that she goes out to 1 million times a day. At least that's what it feels like. And then there's a bigger yard that I call the big yard. And when she has escaped, it has been when she's let out into the big yard. So there's holes in the fence, and she's a husky, and she can jump much higher than Juno could. So needless to say, she hasn't had much time in the big yard since these escapes. But Aria's doing great. 13er Rex near Leadville, training that's worked for you, plans for 25. All right, so these are 3 questions. I'll start with the first one. 13er Rex near Leadville. I don't know if this is technically Leadville. I think Dyer Peak is there. It's a Centennial. It's a nice add-on from Sherman. There's a class 4 option to that from the Leadville side that I haven't done. It's kind of been on my list for a long time. But even if you just do like Dyer, I believe it's Dyer, like on its own, it's a nice link up of Sherman, and then you kind of add some nice rolling ridgeline, which is pretty fun. Otherwise, 13er wise, and this is maybe not Leadville as much, but more maybe towards BV. But I really like the Centennial, was that Emerald Peak? Let me see. I forget the name of it, but it's the one that you can add on with like Oxford Belford. I believe it's Emerald. Yeah, that's a really beautiful one as well. I think it's fairly well traveled. So I talked a little bit earlier about like 13ers not having a ton of trail, and this one has about 50%. So that's kind of fun. And I like that spot in the Sawatch a lot. I think it's really, really pretty back there. There's a lot of like high alpine lakes. So I just think it's nice. Plans for 2025. So, and I'll get the training. I'm not skipping that. Plans for 2025. I have like a permanent list. I think there's a lot of similar questions of like what I want to do along these lines. I have like a note in my phone, and I guess it doesn't really matter, but I have a note app in my phone, and I just like always am adding to it. So I think, let me pull it up and see what it says, because I've put some thought into what I want to do this year. So, okay, this is interesting. I didn't even remember this. So I want to do Quandary to Democrat loop. So starting at Quandary Standard, going up that, linking the ridges between, and then ending Democrat, or maybe coming down Lincoln to the highway there. Not really sure. Capital in one day. I mentioned the bells in one day. That's kind of like one or the other. I really want to make an attempt at Nolan's in the future. So I want to do some beta this year of doing a slow lens. So it's just the Nolan's route slower, not do an official attempt. For those of you who don't know what Nolan's is, you can look it up, but it's essentially linking 100 miles of 14ers from Tabawash to Elbert. So every 14er there. And you have like 70 hours to officially do it. And because you're linking them up, you're not doing the standard route. So you're basically going like ridge to ridge, peak to peak to peak. So a lot of it, I think I have experience with, but I want to do the slow version just to know exactly where to go. And then soft rock. So this is kind of one of my other plans. Like I want to do another 100 this year. I'm kind of waiting on lottery gods still. I'll probably never get into hard rock because it's fucking impossible. But soft rock is doing the hard rock course just again on your own. So a couple of friends and I are planning to do that as well. And then, someone asked about CT in here, and I'll go back to these questions, but I want to finish the CT. So I have like 70 miles of that left, the Colorado Trail. And then there's some stuff with ARIA I want to do. And then I would love to get up to Idaho again. I'm actually thinking of doing my 100-miler up there. So we'll see. Training plans that have worked for me. So it's interesting. I hired a coach for Leadville when I ran it. I wouldn't probably not, for me personally, do a coach again. Coaches are great. I guess I wouldn't do a coach again unless I wanted to be like really competitive. I think coaches are great in like pushing you to a level that maybe you couldn't get to on your own. I've kind of always trained by myself in terms of like plans. Like when I did my first marathon, I basically Googled it and then built a marathon plan, built a half Iron plan, built an Ironman plan, all kind of on the same thing. But I guess to answer your question more specifically, Mike, like I've added weight training a lot more in the past 6 to 8 months, and I want to continue that. I think for runners in particular, and hikers, like not doing weight training can really affect you in terms of like your recovery time, obviously your strength, but I think it just makes your body more dynamic, which is good. And then along those lines, I want to add sprinting back a lot more into my training. I can go low and slow for fucking ever, but sprinting really helps you with kind of having more experience in your higher heart rates, and it inevitably makes you faster if you do it properly. All right, one more here, and then I'll get back to the chat. And thank you all for joining. Seriously, I appreciate it. I'm excited to do this. What ski lines are you looking forward to? And so basically kind of similar question of like what's on my list. So I'm going to go back to the notes app here. And I have a whole section of like Coolars. I haven't put much thought into this specifically, but just reading off what's on my list, Ice Mountain Refrigerator Coular, Grizzly A, which is a Centennial. You can do I think it's like a north facing Coular on that. The Holy Cross Coular is amazing, just aesthetically really pleasing, but kind of a bitch to get back to that. Savage Coular. There's a bunch on Citadel Peak, Mount Jasper, the Bell Cord on Maroon Peak. That's been on my list forever too. The issue I have with the Bell Cord is like, from what I've seen, once it gets to a point where it's kind of safe for my tolerance to snowboard or splitboard, the conditions in it are just absolutely heinously garbage. So it kind of comes across as more of a snow climb, but then you have a massive approach to do like a really iffy snow climb. But that's on my list. Castle Coular, again on Castle Peak from a 14er perspective. Quandary North Coular is great. The La Plata North Coular as well. Like those have been on my list forever. All right, back to chat. Kevin asked about 100-miler, no crew. That is really interesting you asked about that, Kevin, because that is something I've been thinking about. Not necessarily because of it's a twofold answer there. I feel really awful asking people to help me with a 100-miler. My family and friends have helped out for the 3 that I've done. It's so selfish, and it's like not the best time for them. So kind of, I like that as a challenge. So we'll see. If I end up doing I Am Tough, which is 100 I'm looking at in Idaho, assuming, I don't know, again, depending on what lotteries shake out here, that might be a lot more self-reliant than the ones I've done in Colorado, but we'll see. Thanks, Amy. I appreciate the note. Good luck with your 14ers this summer. Let me know in the chat here if you're still around, like which ones you got left. I'd love to talk about those. Hell yeah, Jared. So asking about the Chicago Basin, pigeon. So yeah, I think again, like it's so tough because I have a life obviously that doesn't revolve around the mountains sometimes, although it's basically the same these days. But the Chicago Basin is amazing. You mentioned pigeon. I've also really wanted to do arrow and vessel. I know not in the Chicago Basin per se, but those are absolutely on my list. I want to just get back into the basin in general. I've like tentatively thought about trying to run it in a day from Purgatory. So do like Purgatory, the 4, and then come back. I don't know. We'll see. I think kind of where I'm shifting these days is a little bit away from like the sign up ultras to just kind of doing more stuff on my own. I love organized races. There's absolutely like a huge benefit to doing them, but they're so expensive. They're friggin' impossible to get into, the ones I want to do at least. And it's also very definite. Like you have one day to do something or 2 or whatever. And if it's not your day, like it's not your day. So I just like the freedom of kind of, sorry, Mike, I'm laughing at your comment here, but I just like the freedom of doing things on my own timeline versus like a definitive thing. Mike mentioned Luann. That's Arya's alter ego, which is hilarious that you know that because it's absolutely true. And when she's bad, that's what I call her. Ski Cooper. Hell yeah. I haven't been to Ski Cooper myself. I've heard it's a great place to skin up and down. I've heard from just friends who have done it. It's like one of the few places here that is pretty lenient about the uphill policy. A lot of the more commercially owned places have very restricted ways to do that. And I've heard Cooper's great. So that's awesome. Cooper and Copper and just, I think, the Central Northern Mountains have had a pretty good season. So that's awesome that you guys had fun there. Sorry, I know me sitting silently on a video is maybe not the best content. I'm just reading things. Thanks for the note, Gray. That's awesome. And also, I want to say, like, failing summits. I think we need, as a community here, we can maybe start with 31 people and then grow. But like a failed summit, I don't really love that language. To me, okay, you didn't and I'm not taking a shot at you by any means by saying this. Whoops. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a sec because it seems like my connection's not ideal. But yeah, like a failed summit is, I think having the decision making to turn around is like the best thing that you could possibly do. I remember when I hiked Capitol, and this was like way earlier in my kind of like hiking experience, at least in Colorado. And I remember there's a guy who like got to the top of K2 and he was like, he wasn't even in our group, but he was just like, I'm going to turn around. And it was like 6 a.m., 5 a.m., super early in the morning. He had plenty of time, like from a weather perspective, but it was just like, I'm not feeling it. And I just, especially my attitude on that, again, has changed because of the accident. But I think like, that's so respectable to do that. I know a lot of us have probably heard this expression. I know I used to freaking hate it, but like the mountains are not going anywhere. And so it's much, 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 much better to turn around on something than to like make a decision that is probably ego driven. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Getting to the top of a mountain is really for yourself. I mean, and I say this like kind of lightheartedly, but like no one really cares what you're doing. People care, obviously. I don't mean like nobody cares about you. That's really harsh. But like in terms of your achievements, like there's probably very few people in your life who are going to look at you different if you summit something versus not. Obviously, your own experience, like, we all go out there when we're, trying to get to the top Like, that's the goal. But I think like the word failure is a harsh one. I don't really love that. So I'm on my soapbox about that. But anyway, okay. 16 left, Amy. You got this. That's an aggressive summer, but you can definitely do it. Or summer, fall, whatever. All right. Sam's working on his crampon and ice axe techniques to get into some cool R's this spring. Wondering what my favorite easy, moderate. Ooh, good question. And I think working on your techniques is a freaking awesome idea, Sam. I think I've said this in other videos that you can have the best gear in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, you might as well just throw it in the trash can. It's just a weight you're carrying on your back. So I'm glad you're getting into the knowledge end of things. Easy at moderate snow climbs. So I think if you want to go back to Quandary as an example, the South Cristo one, super moderate. Because it's south facing, it will melt a little bit faster. It'll warm a little bit faster, but it's a pretty solid one. Not super, super steep. Grays and Tories have a bunch. I would probably look at like the Y Couloir on Grays. It's a little bit. It's definitely a step up from Cristo because the approach is a lot more diesel, but it's also like in terms of difficulty, pretty similar. I like that one as well. If you are like getting into kind of the split boarding aspect, or even if you're not skiing or split boarding down, it's well traveled enough where you're probably not going to be post holing a ton. Same thing with Cristo. Like, I don't want to assume how you're traveling, so I won't. But if you're walking down, like, that's obviously something to consider because of just the nature of, the snow. Horseshoe on Boudoir Peak, I believe. These are all on my website and channel for the most part too. Horseshoe's a really good one. Sorry if I'm pausing. My connection is saying it's unstable, which I'm not a fan of. But you're basically just kind of walking around on tundra, and then you get to the base of the couloir, super quick climb, not super steep, usually pretty well traveled. So those are kind of ones that come to mind. But I would say, like, poke around the website and channel. On all the website write-ups, I talk about the steepness in there, so you can kind of see, what's more intense versus not. All right. Amy, I love that. Blanc is definitely on my list as well. Rainier is, so one of the things that Jason wanted to do before he passed was to do Rainier in a day. And he made a joke that it was because, like, mediocre amateur did it, so it feels like he had to. So in his memory, I would love to do Rainier as well. The problem that I have with that is the permitting system for Rainier is like absolutely bananas. So especially if you're applying for a single day, it's like nearly impossible. You're basically at the what's the fucking word I'm thinking of? You're hoping that the park rangers are nice to you. Cool. All right. I'll do one more, and then I'm going to pop back to my last questions here. Same. I have like, I want to do like a revenge tour. Honestly, I have like a bunch of peaks that I've turned around on, and I'm thinking of, I've always kind of thought of like doing a kind of a one video where it's like a revenge tour of just all these peaks that I wasn't able to summit. But there's nothing wrong with turning around. And Wolfgang said it perfectly. Like, it does. It feels bad in the moment, but you'll never regret it because you'll be able to have another attempt, and that's the most important thing. All right. Michael, I'm going to get to your question, and I would also encourage anyone who lives in the Front Range, more neighborhood-wise, Denver people, stand up, Denver area, like, shout out some neighborhoods because I have no idea on that one. But I'm going to hop back over to some Instagram questions as well. Mario asked two questions. The first one was obviously like him being a smartass, but then the second one was more real. I'm going to answer both just because I don't. Why the fuck not? The first one was how much milk do you drink on an average Thursday? Uh, I'm not a big milk drinker, but this is a shameless plug, and I'm not sponsored by friggin' anyone. But what I like to do, especially after a workout, is mixing milk with the salted caramel Tailwind recovery. It is absolutely amazing. Highly recommend it. So when I'm drinking milk, it's typically in that vehicle. And then his second question was how to overcome fear of high exposure, which people ask all the time. And I actually really like this question because I think the other part of this question that I get is how do I go from class 2 to class 3 or class 3 to class 4? And I've talked about this a bunch, but because we're here hanging out tonight, I'll address it again, which is, in my opinion, class is far less important than exposure. Like you could have a low class 3 move with 1,000-foot cliff behind you, and you're going to feel a lot different about that than a higher class 4 with like maybe a 5 or 10-foot drop. So it so much depends on the exposure, in my opinion, versus the class. Because I think most people have a more visceral reaction to exposure. And for those of you who aren't aware, exposure is like when you're climbing something and you can kind of feel the space behind you. Like there's a humongous drop, or just any kind of drop. Like that's what exposure is. Although there's another way to say it. There's many definitions of it, but that's what this is referring to. But in terms of overcoming your fear, I think it is really an individual answer. But what I've kind of canned response created over the years is that I think a really good place to feel out exposure is going into like a climbing gym and just seeing how you do on like a 60-foot wall. Because if you're good on a 60-foot wall or feel more comfortable, or even bouldering, like starting with bouldering, because a 10-foot, whatever, 8 to 10-foot drop with no rope is probably going to be a pretty good place to start there as well. And then like the other part is a tough one, but once you feel good in like those controlled environments, like really the only way to overcome that fear is by gaining experience. So if you can start with hikes or scrambles that have maybe less exposure, and again, like this is a really tough one. People probably might ask, like, what are some of those examples? Like, it kind of depends on you as a person. The one that I always think of for you front range, for you Colorado people, is the Kelso Ridge on Torreys. I think that's a great kind of intro scramble. You get class 3, you get a knife edge. There is some exposure there, but it's also like not a super committing route. And I say that committing meaning like if you got halfway through, it's pretty easy to kind of turn around and bail if you didn't feel comfortable. I think that's the challenge with a lot of scrambles is in some cases, if you get to a point where maybe it's above your head, quote unquote, in terms of difficulty, you then have to go and repeat those moves and it's just as challenging. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on that. All right, next question. Same thing. I think this is Stacy who asked this. How does one get comfortable enough to do to not be scared shitless to do Bell's Cap, Little Bear? Again, I think it all is like a progression. So if you can start with like class 3, not these big grand traverses, the 4 traverses, and then feel out how you're doing. And I think with experience, you'll start to trust your experience, you trust your body. But again, I think it's kind of hypocritical a bit, but it's like making sure that you never get too comfortable where you're just like, oh, this rock's good. Like this ridge will act exactly the way I want. I think having that level of fear is like, okay. It's just not letting it overtake your decision-making and then how you're moving. I think those are like really, really important things to always be evaluating. Because if you're just doing something out of fear or out of ego, I think it's like not a great place to be starting. I'll do one more and then I'll bounce back to chat here. Do I plan on completing the Colorado Centennial? So I think I alluded to this earlier. Maybe, probably. I do have like, I like the Centennials. I'm going to layer this answer. They're much less traveled. I enjoy the 13ers. I'm not going to be a 13er snob and like shit on the 14ers because there's a lot of people on them. For those of you who have watched me, you probably know my feelings about sharing the mountain with other people. It's not that I feel entitled to have mountains on my own. It's just for me personally, my experience is generally a lot more fun when I'm not surrounded by 1,000 other people. But I do like the Centennials and 13ers in that sense. But again, it kind of goes to that answer I had earlier, which is just like, I'm more focused on doing stuff that I want to do versus what I feel like I need to. And I don't really feel the need to like have any kind of timeline to finish the Centennials, but I am definitely slowly taking away at them. And there are some really fun ones that are not just walk-ups, and they have some really nice scrambles. I'm thinking of those in the Sneffels Basin there. I think it's like Dallas Peak or Tea Kettle, one of the two, that has like that class 5 small move towards the top. Like that would be fun, especially in the spring with a snow climb to kind of get there. All right, back to the chat. Where the hell was I? Dude, MB, like seeing moose for me. So I have like 2 animals, moose and mountain goats, that I don't think I'll get jaded to seeing. I was doing a trail run this summer in the Gore Range, and I was about to finish the run, and I came across this like massive bull just like standing in a like puddle essentially, and it was just so awesome. And then same thing with mountain goats. Like I don't know why, but I did Blue Sky last year with Aria, and we got to the summit, and the goats were chilling there as they often do. And it was just so cool, just like watching them. They're just really awesome animals. Damn, Amy, 40 in a summer is aggressive. I respect that. But I also, like, I totally get where you're coming from. So for those of you who are not following along in the chat, Amy did 40 14ers in the summer, which is a lot. It's a commitment. But that's awesome. I think you got no problem finishing the last 16 at that rate then. Okay, so I guess like this is so tough for me to answer, and I'll try. I don't want to dodge questions here. But what cities, neighborhoods would I recommend? I can't recommend neighborhoods in Denver. I've never lived there. I think in terms of like cities, it really depends on where you want to be. Going up more north towards Fort Collins, you get a different access of mountains. The mountains up there, the Never Summer Range, as I'm wearing my 100K hoodie here, are absolutely stunning. Probably a lot less trafficked, generally speaking, than some of the other ranges, because there aren't big 14ers. There aren't, I don't think there's any Centennials. I don't even think there's bicentennials up there, but it's stunningly beautiful. If you're looking kind of like Denver Springs area, I don't know. I think like the Golden Lakewood, for me, like I'm trying to be as west as possible so I can jet up to the mountains. The Springs is, I've heard the Springs is great. I've never lived there, but I've heard they have a really good community. And then I guess for the question that you're asking, you also have to consider like what's important to you. So for me, like trail running is really important. So where I live, like having access to trails, obviously, but then year round being super important. Obviously, most places in Colorado get snow, but the way that the snow behaves after a week is a lot different depending on, or even a day, a lot different on where you live. So that's kind of what I can shed some light there. And then obviously, like, I don't know the housing situation you're in, but as I'm sure people who live here know, it's pretty brutal. All right. Thanks, Allison. I really appreciate that. I think for those of you who have like listened before, like I started Virtual Sherpa, I started the website first and then the channel, just because I thought it was good for me. I started it because I couldn't remember shit, and I was using it as like a mountain version of Yelp for me, really. And then I kind of realized like, oh, this might be helpful for other people. So that's just kind of a quick history on how we got here. And then just video content for me is a lot more enjoyable to create than the writing, which I do like to write, but it's different kind of writing than what I really enjoy. Oh, good call, Sam. The flat irons are great. I have admittedly not as much experience as I would like up there, but the flat irons are a great place to do some scrambling for sure. Even if you're not doing the flat irons, there's so many other routes in that section of Boulder. I unfortunately don't have a ton of information on it on my website, but I'm sure you could do a quick Google and find some really solid scrambles in that area. And if we're talking about like the flat irons, Bear Peak, super short scramble at the top there. But if you've like literally never done a scramble, it gives you like a tiny bit of what that looks like. And the rock's pretty slick, so you get, a little bit of experience there. Yeah, so Sam kind of chimed in. I agree. Golden's dope. All right. I'll do a couple more questions, then I'll bounce back to the other questions. Do I have plans for a series where I talk about progression of mountains in Colorado's for beginners to more advanced? Not really. I've been asked this a couple of times. I struggle with like the format of how this would look. But I will say, like, I have a difficulty rating on my website for every single hike. I try to be really consistent in that. I know that, again, is a subjective thing. Difficulty is based on the individual, the experience they have, the shape they're in, etc. But I think if you watch my ranking the 14ers video, if you want to just talk about those, I think you could. That's the closest thing I have to like progressing in terms of 14ers. I know there's some disagreement on the list, but I stand by it for being basically a good ranking system to follow if you're kind of working through. I have nothing against 14ers.org. I haven't talked about them at all, but also like they have a list of mountains specifically if you want to just look at that as well. In terms of other hikes, I think there's just so many here, and it depends on where you live. So I try to just be consistent with when I post. Having the difficulty be, everything be consistent, but just the difficulty be pretty standard so that you can search around for something near where you are or where you want to travel. And using the map feature on my website, I'm plugging the website a lot here, but and then you can kind of click into the hike and figure out, all right, is this the match or not? And then go from there. William, great question, my dude. Have I seen a mountain lion on any of my hikes? I have not seen a mountain lion ever in my life, ever. I've seen some bobcats actually really very, very close, like I think at my house before, and I got really excited. I think for those of you who follow me on Instagram, I posted about this like, I think a year ago, and I thought I saw a mountain lion and I got really jacked up, but it was a bobcat instead. So no, I've never seen a mountain lion. I've traveled thousands of miles in this state on foot, on vehicle, etc., and I've never seen one. And I don't know if that's a bad thing per se, but never seen one. It's one of my kind of elusive animals still. All right, I'm going to bounce back to some other questions because there are some good ones that I haven't gotten to yet. Okay, so given the time of year, I think this is a really good one. How am I addressing, well, it says assessing, but I just put my own word there. How am I assessing snowpack for snowboarding down? And we could talk for an hour about this topic, but I'll preface this by saying, check out my video that talks about winter hiking basics. I forget the exact name of it, but it's on the channel. It talks about avalanches, talks about basically the full answer of what I would say here. But I can be kind of direct in my answer, which is personally, I'm not really fucking with avalanches in the winter. I have taken online versions of Airy 1. I haven't taken Airy 2, but I have a very good understanding of the snowpack. However, my tolerance for winter snowpack in general, with specifically the second part of the question, which is snowboarding down, hiking is a little different, and I'll explain that in a second. But for snowboarding, like I want to be able to send what I want to send. Like if I want to do a steep ass line, I want to feel pretty good relatively about that. And I don't see a world where, given the snowpack we have in Colorado, where that will ever happen in the winter months. So I typically am sticking to the spring, when the snowpack is consolidated, meaning all of the layers in the snow that develop throughout the course of the winter are kind of less, and there may be more one, and the issues you're dealing with are more with the surface of the snow itself. Obviously, there's always melt going on underneath, but typically that's not as unpredictable as some of the big slab avalanches that you see happening in the winter. So in the winter, like just like shortly, concisely as I can, giving some information about this. If you get a big ass snowstorm, as an example, and then it doesn't snow for a week, 10 days, whatever, that big ass snowstorm, all of that snow turns into basically a really crappy layer within the snow. And so if that happens in November and then February rolls around, well, that layer is still there, but it's maybe a much deeper in the snowpack. And so and then you're going to get multiple of those layers going on. And the lack of snow is just one example. Obviously, wind loading, and there's so many different things that affect it. But in the spring, when all of those layers are more consolidated and the snow is more predictable, you're mainly dealing with wet slab and wet slides in general, which are mainly just affected by the temperature and the sun. So it's just a little bit easier and a lot more safe to predict. So for me, that's the first thing I'm assessing is like the time of year, which it's like end of March, maybe sometimes into April. And then the tool that I'm always using is CAIC. They put out avalanche forecasts, and I'll put this here in the chat just because I feel like it's super important. They put out avalanche forecasts, and for Colorado, we're so lucky to have this resource, but they put out avalanche forecasts daily through the spring. So you can always check what conditions are, even by range. So if you're doing something in the Front Range versus the Sangres, and they give you all kinds of amazing information on aspects and, the different elevation. And it's just really, really important to be knowledgeable about that, especially if you're doing the second part, which is skiing or snowboarding. When you're doing a snow climb, it's definitely important, or a hike in general. It's still very, very, very important. But when you're doing an activity like skiing or snowboarding, there's just so much more risk that can happen. So anyway, check out my video on snowpack, and I'll link it here. I'll do some linking at the end, maybe when things are a little bit winding down more. But all right, next one. What's on my calendar for 2025? Trips, vacation, races, etc. So I think I've answered some of this, but I want to plug something. So I will be doing trail work again with 14ers Initiative. So look out for information on that. They typically don't schedule me until February-ish, but we'll be doing another project with them. We've done Quandary the last 2 years. I would love to have any and all of you come and show up. It's an absolutely welcoming environment for everyone. It's a great opportunity to there's so many reasons I could say this is great, but like, let's start with selfish ones. If you need trail work for something, if you need volunteering for something, it's an awesome way to do it. You can come hang out with me. You can ask all these questions that you're doing in chat, and I'll do my best to answer them in person and not sound like a complete idiot. But also, more importantly, all joking aside, it's really a great way to see how much work that these people who do this full time put in to the trails that we take for granted, frankly. And it's not just on 14ers, because there's trail volunteers everywhere, but it's really, really, really cool and humbling to see how much work you get done in 8 hours. So definitely look out for more information on that. I don't know what mountain yet. I'd kind of like to switch up Quandary, no disrespect to it, but it's just, it'd be cool to do something different. So I'll be putting more information once that is live everywhere. I'll put it on the community tab in the channel here. I'll put it on my Instagram, on the Patreon as well. So yeah, just look out for that. Races, I think I've alluded to this a bit. I'm waiting on really a one lottery, to be honest, that will kind of determine my entire schedule. But just like ballpark speaking, I want to do another 100K. I'm going to do another 100 miler. So those are like the two on my list. I'm thinking of doing something in Oregon. There's like a cool 100K up there. And then for 100 milers, yeah, I have a ton on my list. And then this kind of folds into the trips vacation thing. I don't have any trips or vacations planned, but I would love to get over to either the Alps or the Dolomites again. And there's some races over there that I could do. So I might kind of like double dip. We'll see. But generally, like, I'm going to spend probably a lot of time in Colorado again, and probably get up to Idaho as well. Those are like kind of the two big things. And then Oregon. I would love to do another volcano. I was thinking of doing like 3 different ones last year, and I just wasn't really mentally in a spot to be doing it. So decided it wasn't the best idea, but would love to get back up and do another volcano or two this year as well. All right. I got a couple more here, but I like to bounce back. Murray, where are you at in the Western Slope? I actually have a friend who just moved to Montrose, so I might be spending more time over there. Yeah, Mike, I'll definitely keep you posted. Would love to finally get a chance to meet you too. I'm not sure. It'll probably be the trail work project. Sorry, I'm not being very transparent here or forthcoming. The trail work project will likely be a June, July, August ordeal, just because that's when the 14ers initiative tend to schedule things the most heavily. Montrose, let's go. Nice. Yeah, I actually, we'll see. There's a lot of things I will see on, but in terms of where I'm living in the future, we'll see. I love that area. Montrose is like a great jumping off point to my favorite range in the state, in the Southern Mountains there in the Sangres. Have I done anything over 15,000 feet? Great question. Yes, I've done Kilimanjaro. I'll give you kind of a quick story about it. When I was in college, one of my cousins did it, and I was like, damn, that sounds really cool. And she was telling me about it. And so I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to do it too. And I mean, I've been hiking my whole life, so this wasn't like abnormal, but this was definitely the most difficult thing I've ever done. I highly recommend Kili. I think it's a great trip. Doing, Kilimanjaro and then doing like safari after is like a perfect 1-2 combo. Kilimanjaro is really, really, really cool. I think I have a write-up on it on my website. The video, I think I deleted because it's absolutely trash and it's nothing like what I do now. But I had like a slideshow summary of it, I think. But that's the only experience I have over 15,000 feet. And I remember specifically when we summited. So when you do Kilimanjaro, you have to have a guide or a porter. It's like basically their tourism, their economy is very heavily dependent on it. And the last night you go from 15,000, I think is like where your base camp is, to the summit, which is like, I don't know, 18 or 19, if I remember, something like that. And I remember like the hallucination from that level of altitude is like absolutely insane. It was a really, really memorable experience. And I guess like you didn't maybe ask this per se, but people have asked me like, do I want to do Everest or things like that? Not really. I don't. That doesn't sound fun to me. It sounds like a really big pissing contest with people who have a lot of money and want to feel like they're accomplishing something, which, you summit, you are. But I think for me, it's more just about like the experience and the thought of spending like $50,000 to $100,000 to like be, how do I say this appropriately? Very close to other individuals on a mountain just sounds like not really me. Having said that, there are some peaks like down in South America in particular that I would like to do. But like chasing the like 6 summits, I mean, that's not really me, even though the name Sherpa would very much say otherwise. All right. Advice for lodging when you're doing a trail that's farther from home on a budget. Hell yeah, dude, you camp. And I do try to, in every single post, I try to talk about camping, because that was one of the things when I was building the website that I thought was like a massive gap. of like, all right, cool, this hike is here, but like, where the hell do I sleep? Freecampsites.net, I think it is. Let me see here. Yeah, .net. And I'll drop that in the chat right now. Is a freaking awesome resource if you want something a little more like car camping wise. It's really good if you're like in an area where maybe you have no idea what the camping situation is. But it's dope. Really, I use it all the time, especially if I'm traveling out of Colorado. And then, yeah, I mean, in terms of like other, if you don't want to do camping, usually you can find, especially, I mean, if you get away from like Summit County, really, there's a lot of places you can stay in like some of the smaller towns and like a cheap hotel that are close enough to some of the hiking that like won't really destroy your budget. But yeah, I mean, free campsites is obviously free. And then I would say in Colorado in particular, we have a really, really good camping situation where there are so many dispersed camping options that are free and like usually pretty easy to find stuff. William, you're asking the deep cut questions here. Do I have plans to go back to Gannett? For those of you who aren't aware, Gannett is where the accident occurred, where Jason died. So it's a touchy subject. No, I would say I've thought about it. The thought has entered my head, but it's probably not something that I can do right now. And I know for some people, like going back to this, where the accident occurred is important to them. Because I was there, it's really not important to me at all. At least right now. So, yeah, no plans for that. Oh, that's good to know, Sam. I didn't know that about just the Forest Service with dispersed camping. That's cool. Throw that link in the if you don't mind sharing it to some strangers. Yeah, drop that link because personally I'd like to have it too, or just DM it to me or email or whatever. All right, I'm gonna go back to just my last couple questions here. Before, and thanks. This has been an hour. This is crazy. I can't believe we're still going here. That's what she said, but or he said. But yeah, feel free to keep throwing stuff in the chat. Have I hiked Big Ben's South Rim, Northeast Rim, Emery Peak? Any plans to do so? No, on all of those, and I don't have plans, but we never know. We'll see. As I've kind of alluded to, I have that note in my phone that has literally by state things that I want to do. So I'm sure these will end up on my list eventually. And then last question here about advice on making like miles easier. Dude, if I had that answer, especially at elevation, I would probably be a much better athlete. Generally speaking, like miles at elevation are just always going to feel pretty brutal. For me, it's like when I get over 13,000 feet, like I will look at my watch and I'm like, oh, I don't have it on, of course. And I'll be like, oh, my heart rate's going to be like 160 and it's like 107. The lack of oxygen is really, it's intense and it slows you down. Distance wise, I think like getting into a level of fitness where you can run a distance comfortably is great. So if you're doing an 8-mile hike, like being able to run 10 comfortably is good. If you want to get really specific, like as I've transitioned as like what I like to do over the years, I will be running a lot more, especially the downhills and the flats. So if you want to make something easier, decreasing the amount of time you're doing it is probably a good place to start. But yeah, I mean, sometimes like when you're up in the Alpine, like high elevation, like it's just hard. There's not really, you can get on the bike I have behind me and, but also I know a serious answer there too, like leg strength, super important, core strength, super important. If you can have good endurance in that, it'll make things just a lot easier. All right. Those are my questions. I'm not sharing anymore. Thank God. But I'll go back to the chat here. So keep firing stuff away. So yeah, a lot of questions about logistics, which I'm here for because I think it's important. It's something that maybe people don't talk about because I don't know why, but um, so with longer trips, it depends. So the question is, with longer trips, like going to Idaho as an example, do I find places to camp there too? It depends. I think when I have the dog, um, it's nice, especially if it's hotter, to like get a room where there's AC. Also, just have like a place to leave her if I want to go to dinner or whatever, and not like stick her in the truck. Um, but for me personally, like my this is like maybe crazy for what I like to do. I have kind of a limit. I can camp maybe two, maybe 3 nights, and then I'm like, I need to like clean myself and like get into a hotel. Um, so to be honest, like that's the reason like a through hike is like just absolutely not appealing to me at all. Even backpacking in general, I kind of struggle with. I'd rather suffer through a really long ass day than like schlep a bunch of gear and then camp feeling sticky and disgusting. This makes me sound like very basic, but I'm just being honest. But with bigger trips like that, usually if I'm going like to Idaho as an example, like I'm obviously going to like snag a hotel at some point. But then once you're like into the mountain area, especially in Idaho, there's not a lot of options. So usually it is just camping. The camping has evolved for me. So I have a truck now. I'm going to be hopefully this year getting some kind of a like soft top for the back and having a more of a official like sleeping area there, which will make things a lot better. I've thought about doing like a portable shower too. So we'll see. I think like it kind of depends on you as a person, but yeah, I feel like once you get to certain places, there's sometimes isn't a ton of options but camping. So like for example, if you're doing something, if you want to do like multiple mountains in the same like range, you're probably not going to like hike, drive 40 minutes to like whatever the town is and then come back. Like it doesn't make a ton of sense. So it depends. Hell yeah, Aiden. Great question. 21-year-old broke college student. We've all been there. Some of us are still broke at whatever age we are. So no shame there. How do I get into backcountry skiing? I love skiing. I love climbing. Want to take the next step. All right. So a lot of questions here. I would say the first thing, the most important thing is education. So for those of you who, or if you missed earlier, like I talked a bit about this. I have a video that I'll find here maybe as I'm talking that talks about just like avalanche basics. Because we live in 2025, there's so many free resources, but there also is, there is a great value in field experience. So it's good to go and read. This is the video, by the way. It's great to like read and watch videos, but also understanding things in the field is super important. So education, ARI 1 classes, and I'll type that here too. This is like, oops. I think that's what it is. If not, you can Google that. It'll be directionally correct. But those are like the class work to take. And I know you said you're broke, so look for free ones. There are free ones. During COVID, actually, a lot of places offered things for free, and they might still exist on the internet. Again, if you do the virtual ARI 1 class, you're not getting the field experience of digging a pit, of some of the other things that you're doing in a field, which are valuable. So just keep that in mind. But education being step 1, step 2 being finding a partner who you can have open and honest conversations with, like AKA someone you're comfortable with, but someone who knows more than you is a great place to start too. And then definitely watch the video, but I touched on like just like the time of year. I would not recommend winter being a time of year to like, let me dabble. I would say the spring is a much safer time to do it. If you're in a place like Colorado, where I know you said you're from Iowa, so definitely not there, but in Colorado where we have snow until July, you can gain experience in a more safe environment. But definitely check that video out that I linked, because it's it says for hikers, but it really all that applies to backcountry skiing as well. And then I guess like gear wise, obviously if I don't know if you have it or not, but like getting a backcountry setup, I'm not a skier, so I know there's different skis versus like a resort ski, but just like the basic gear of like Avi kit, so pro beacon shovel, knowing how to use those things, skins, things like that, those are going to be important too. With all the gear, like there's definitely places you can find things a bit cheaper than I would never. I mean, skins, you might be paying full price. I wouldn't buy used skins. That's probably not a great idea. But for everything else, like getting used things is not the end of the world. Beacon may be the exception there too. But there's ways to get gear like on a budget. So general answer there, but definitely check out the video. And I would say like having the desire to go take that next step is awesome. And maybe it's just a matter of like figuring out what that looks like deciding what's important for you. If it's just like cruising during the winter and doing like trees, or just like getting out and skiing, I think that looks a lot different than maybe like hunting couloirs or like tagging a summit and then adding a descent. Like that level, it's going to vary quite a bit, I think, depending on what you're doing there. Dude, I love these questions. Well, sorry, I skipped one. I'll get to the CT question. Footwear for 14ers. Okay, William, great point. So footwear for 14ers. This has been an evolution for me. Footwear, you can take out 14ers there and just say hiking. And I'm going to go on a little rant for a second. But generally, I think there's this like old school mentality that you have to do everything in hiking boots. And that is a thought for sure. For me, it's way more important to be comfortable and trust the shoe. So whether that's a boot or a shoe. So over the years, I started in boots, kind of progressed to Sportiva. I still use Sportiva, La Sportiva for certain things. But really, I've almost exclusively doing stuff in my Speed Goats, my Hoka Speed Goats. So boots, there's a time and place for them. The time and place for me is when there's snow. And when the snow is not consolidated. So if it's like a winter hike, I'm going to be wearing boots. Obviously wearing a trail runner in the winter is like kind of insane. People do it, kind of insane. So I guess like for me, it's more about comfort. And then also the second part that I said, which is trusting the shoe. So for an example, the Speed Goats are great, but I would not really trust them scrambling. So when I'm scrambling, I'm usually wearing, and I link these in like the videos a lot that I talk about, but I use right now the La Sportiva Cyclones. I like them a lot because if you look at the shoe, they are literally like, you're using the BOA system and they're like on your foot like a sock. Like they're super tight, but also the traction, La Sportiva has nailed traction on trail runners. The reason I don't wear La Sportiva for like ultras is just like my foot shape doesn't do well in them over a ton of miles. So I can make it work for, 8 to 10 to 15, whatever miles. But over the course of 50, 100 miles, it doesn't work out for me. So trail runners are going to be used for me for basically everything that's not a super technical scramble. And I've scrambled in the Speed Goats before. I think I've done like whatever that ridge on Democrat. It depends. Like if I had a fresh pair of Speed Goats, I trust them a lot more than a pair that has like 300 miles on them. When that traction on the bottom goes, it's not it. All right. Section hiking the CT, how does that work logistically and how far is each section away from the front range? It is a ton of driving. Yeah, so with the CT, I don't know. I don't really want to get into this part, but like, so I'm not going to really talk about Jackie, but when I was doing the Colorado Trail, when we were doing it, we would shuttle. So essentially you take a car to the start, or well, I guess to the end of the segment that you're going to do, and then take a car back to the start, and then you do the hike, and then you take the car and back to the start, and then you'd go. So that's what we did for the entire thing. There are ways to not do that. There's a Facebook group every year. I believe it's a new one for the Colorado Trail. Facebook has a place in today's society, believe it or not. For those of you who are younger and are, what the fuck are you talking about? But it is a good spot because you can essentially meet up with people who will shuttle you. So if you don't have a friend or don't have someone to hike it with, there are ways to do that, but likely you're going to be tossing someone gas money or paying them like a small fee to do that. But when I finish the Colorado Trail this summer, that's my plan, is to get a shuttle from Durango to Molas Pass, and then leave my car in Durango, and that's how I'll finish. But yeah, section hiking the CT is like a ton of logistics. It's a ton of logistics. And I think when I finish it, I'll do like a video talking about that. But yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely dedication. I don't want to say it's easier to through hike to through hike, because it's definitely not. Like, that's insane. But logistically, it's just a different conversation. And then check out, if you are interested in doing the Colorado Trail, I have all of the videos, obviously, but I also have the website post where I talk more about the approaches, because for some of the trailheads, the road's rougher and you might need 4x4, or, it's not as straightforward as just like a regular drive. So definitely keep that in mind too, depending on your vehicle. All right. Listen, noobs are welcome. I love this question. Planning Grazing Tories in early April. We did Snicktown in March, but it was below zero and ton of snow. Started training more and better, but how much more of a beast is Grazing Tories? So the biggest beast on Grazing Tories in April is the avalanche risk. Even though you're in April, even though you're getting into that more consolidated spring snowpack, it's definitely not a straightforward winter hike. You'll see a lot of people doing it, and I say winter even though April's the spring for most people. There's going to be an assload of snow. You might not be able to get up to the trailhead still. It all depends, but definitely understand, at least look at the avalanche conditions and understand what you're dealing with. The nice thing is with Grazing Tories is if you take the standard route, starting with Grays first and then looping over to Tories and then back, I'm very cautious to say this, but the avalanche risk is not super high, even in like prime winter conditions, because of the terrain there. But comparing it to Snicktown, yeah, it's like a massive step up. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a much, much, much bigger day. So temperature wise, positive. Let's be positive for a second. Like, it's probably not going to be below zero, but there will be a ton of snow for sure. And the snow will just travel different. What's my best pack in your opinion? Good question. Dylan. So I have the Osprey Talon. I think it's like a 20-liter bag. It's great. I like it. I have, obviously, for those of you who have been like following along, I've shifted a lot towards vests. I have 2 different vests that I use. Actually, I cannot believe that I have this right here. This is like my smaller vest. So this is a, who the hell makes this? Ultimate Direction. God, my brain. So this is like my smaller vest. And then I do have an Osprey one as well. I use the Osprey for like when I'm bringing the drone, essentially, because it's a much bigger bag. So for me, vests are kind of replacing backpacks. And again, I've alluded to this a bunch of times. There's no like uppity, backpacks are great, but it's just easier to run in a vest. It's not as much bouncing, so more comfort. Mike, what's up, dude? I did not get into Leadville, but if you need any support with Leadville, I'm so pumped to help you out this year. So definitely text me. All right. I want to do Oh, so for the CT, yeah, I have shit, 6 segments left. It's going to be one trip, so it's like 70 miles. I'm hoping to do it. I'm going to bring Aria, but I'm hoping to do it in like three days, something like that. So it'll be one big trip. I will segment out the videos when I do it to do a separate one for each, but it will be one go, if you will. Because I'm at Molas Pass right now and I have to finish in Durango. It's about 70 miles. There's not really a logistically good spot in between. And plus 70 miles for like, I know it's a lot of miles, but it's not that many. So I think it's an easy enough kind of a one go deal. And right back at you, Mike. You're a beautiful person as well. I was so pumped to meet you in Leadville this year, and I'm fucking so jacked to see you run this year. Okay. Any pointers for starting a 14er? Dang. Okay. I've talked a lot about safety, and I will never not emphasize that. But honestly, the biggest thing that I would say is just go for it. Like, make sure you have some level of research, but until you try something, you never know what you can achieve. So, like, if you want to do a 14er, pick one that is reasonable for you. You can check out all of my different rankings. You can check out anybody's rankings. They're all going to look very similar. Make sure, I've posted about like basic gear to carry if you've never hiked before. Like, let's just cover like some super basic stuff. Cotton kills, as the expression goes. So like, don't wear cotton. Man-made materials are generally better. Food, water, good weather. That's super important for a safety perspective. But pick one that like you want to do that is reasonable. Like, I would not start with like Capital. That's not a great idea. But like, go do Bierstadt, go do Sherman, go do Democrat, go do Quandary. Like, I have a ton of resources on my site. Feel free to like drop comments. I usually read most of them. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to give more specific things, but yeah, just send it. Like, you can, if I have any kind of thought on life, like, people can accomplish so many things. You just have to be in a good mental spot and like not sell yourself short. Like, you can accomplish amazing things. I am not special. And I don't think there's many special people on the planet. I think that there are people who just like want things more. And so they go after things. And that doesn't just mean I'm not saying just go do something for like, obviously safety is important. Mountains are very serious, as I've talked about, but I think doing a first 14er is a great goal. So I think it's a great thing to try to do. Grant, thanks for joining, man. I appreciate all your comments and appreciate you. So thanks for hanging out a bit. All right, Allison's question: having done the Chicago Basin 14ers, how realistic is it to hit 4 in one day? I think it's realistic. I think you have to have a good weather window, but once you're camping in the basin there, I imagine like that's the question, not like just going to do them all in one day. I can answer that. It's a different answer. But if you get a decent base camp, I would recommend doing all in 4 in one day. When we went, our plan was to do that, but there's just some factors that came up that didn't allow that to happen. So we ended up doing 2 and 2 back to back. But once you're kind of camping in the Chicago Basin, it's not a super, Wyndham and Sunlight are over here. And then I can't say anything. You guys know that. Elos, North Elos are on the other side of that basin. But like, it's kind of like a big loop if you do it correctly. I would say like the weather is the biggest factor. So if you have a green light weather day, I think it's reasonable for sure. Excuse me, that was disgusting. Sorry. But also just like the fitness coming into play, obviously that's going to be a factor too. But yeah, for sure reasonable. How many nights did I do at a time for sections of the CT? So we got up to like 3-4 nights, I think, at most. The entire Colorado Trail has been done with dogs. Not everybody, but for me. So that was a massive factor of like how much food we have to carry for them. I have to carry for them, but also just like thinking of them. A dog, for those of you who own it, they're amazing, but they will go until they're literally like can't anymore. So I think it's really important to understand your dog. And 3 or 4 days was on average 60-ish miles for us at a time, which is like a lot for a dog. So yeah, that's that. Thoughts on doing guide videos for Bennett? Great question. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I will not fuck with rock climbing or alpine ice videos. It's not. There's two reasons why. For me personally, I don't love rock climbing on its own. I don't love ice climbing on its own. I think when it's part of an objective, like if I need to do rock climbing in order to get up to a summit, like there's definitely routes that I want to do that involve that. But for me, like just doing like a climbing route, it's not really my thing. I have one of my closest friends loves ice climbing, and that's his jam. He loves doing it, but it's just not really me. But the other answer, and I'm probably will ruffle some feathers by saying this, and I don't really care. I feel like those communities have a lot more judgment going on, and they're also a lot more protective of their routes, and that's totally fair. But I don't really like the internet is not a great place for me as it is, so I don't need to like bring on more people to criticize what I'm doing because their opinion differs. So I guess like long-windedly saying, you might have seen like I did a shark's tooth video in Rocky. It was a fun day. That my buddy who was with me is the friend I'm talking about who loves ice climbing. But and that was cool. It's a different kind of experience, but also like from a logistics standpoint, as I discovered that day, like filming rock climbing and ice climbing is really freaking difficult. And I like the film aspect of things, of like being able to show different things. I love flying the drone. So yeah, this is long-winded. I was just saying like it's probably not in my future. For the record, my goal is not to fly into Leadville. I didn't get in. I'm pretty sure I'm blackballed from that race. But Michael, who's here, is going to be flying into Leadville, and I cannot wait to just be part of that. Yeah, dude, send me your sign. I'm happily munch time. I will happily sign your climbing helmet. I just don't know how that looks. Come to the volunteer day this year with 14ers Initiative, and I'll sign whatever you want. Corey, great question. I talked about Nolan's earlier. I have not done it, but there's like 15 people who have. It's incredibly difficult. But I do want to do Slowlands this year, so I'll report back on advice on someone looking to backpack it, because I'm looking to do that myself this year. Matt's question on, do you plan on finishing the Centennials? I talked about that earlier as well. I haven't done Jagged. Centennials are loosely on my list, but not like a super high priority. I'll be working through them for sure, but it's not like I'm going to be like banging them out because I feel the need to. It's going to be like, all right, I have a free weekend. The weather looks good in this area. That sounds fun. Let me do it. But not like a really super driven to get it done kind of thing. Allison, you did mean approach second day. Yeah, good to know. You could definitely, again, you could trail run the whole thing in a day, but that's like a way different beast. So, yeah, I would say definitely one day is good. Talk about, first of all, Anthony, you don't have to call me, you can just call me Mickey. That's cool. But thoughts on the Crestone Traverse, first thoughts that come to mind. So it's interesting. I was back on the Crestone Needle, as I talked about a little earlier, for the first time in like 5 years. The Crestones are all really, really, really good. Like I highly recommend those for those of you who haven't been before. Really, really solid scrambling. The rock quality is, I'm doing the Italian hand here. It's really good. The Traverse itself. So I haven't done Crestone Peak in a minute, but from what I remember, that red gully there, again, good quality rock, fun, good scramble. The crossover itself, pretty straightforward once you kind of find the entrance. My video is a bit outdated, but I think it still does a decent job. And then the head wall there. So there's a lot of talk about the class 5 move. I can just address that. I mean, yeah, it's a class 5 move, but we talked I talked about exposure earlier. That move has like 0 exposure. It's basically a class 5 move that's like 10 feet off the ground, and it's like a reach up, not a frame, but like up like this. And that's why it's a class 5 move. That's why the entire route is class 5. For those of you who aren't aware, the way Colorado at least grades their YDS system is if there is one move that is whatever class, the highest class it is, the entire route gets labeled that class. So Crestone Traverse, as an example, is class 5 because there is one move that's class 5. That move is fine. I think it's a little challenging, but it's, again, there's not a ton of exposure. It's like a 10-foot drop to the ground. The part that I think is sneaky insane, that when we did it, at least, there's like a massively airy knife edge right after that move that you got one side that's like nothing. It's maybe a 15-foot drop. And then the other side is like 1,000 feet down to South Colony Lakes there. And it's pretty insane to like have that whatever the word is, the difference. My brain is shutting down. But after that, the class 4 head wall is extremely exposed, meaning there is nothing but air behind you, but the rock quality is really, really, really good. So yeah, it's a fun route. I think if you're going to do the traverses, I would say like it's probably between that and oh my God, the Wilsons, the El Diente de Wilson probably being like the first ones I would start with versus Bells and then Little Bear. Little Bear, Blanca definitely being last if you're working through. Uncle Andy, what's up? Have I ever made it to Adirondacks? I know it. Dude, not really. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, I grew up in southern New Hampshire. My mom still lives out there, so I've been spending time out there pretty frequently over the last however long I've been alive in Colorado, like 10 years. So no, I haven't been to Adirondacks. I would love to, but yeah, drop some recommendations. I have like a short list going. I think one of the ones here that I have is it's like, Trap Dyke, I think. It's like a scramble on Mount Colden, if I remember correctly. But no, I would love to get up there. I've heard great things, just haven't really. Whenever I go back to the Northeast, it's usually like New England. And, it's a little bit of a drive from there. So, all right. There isn't a whole lot on the YouTube video of the upper section of Uncompahgre. How much scrambling is involved? Almost none. How awful is Nelly Creek Road? Damn. So the upper section of Uncompahgre, there's like basically no scrambling. It's very, very, very low class 2. I think in the more recent video I showed a bit, but it was snow covered, so it might be hard to tell. But yeah, it's a class 2 route. It's nothing crazy. Those roads. So Nelly Creek, they're rough. They're rough. Down there in particular, they really do not do a lot of maintenance on the roads. So it's going to really depend on a couple of things, probably the time of year being the first thing. So if you're doing it like in the spring when everything's melting, or the early summer when things are melting and you get these big ass ruts forming, it's going to be really rough. When I did Nelly Creek, there's like those creek crossings, if I remember. And again, those are going to kind of depend on like the snow melt and the time of year. I think if I've learned anything about driving on these forest roads while I've lived in Colorado for like 12 years, 10 years now, you can go on to 14ers and read, the status updates of the roads. So 14ers.com has great data on that. However, like any beta, it's totally dependent on the person. So you could read someone who'd be like, I got my Subaru Legacy up there. It was chill, no problem. And then other people are like, I have my lifted Tacoma and I could barely do it. Ultimately, it depends on the driver. and their experience, because a lot of these things, like you read this and I think it's easy for your brain to go to like the negative of like, oh my God, this road is freaking insane. It's going to be so hard. I'm not going to be able to get up. I need a skid plate and a jacked up car and all this shit. Most likely you don't. And also like you have to consider like, let's say you get a mile or two away from a trailhead. A lot of the time that drive and that walk are going to be the same amount of time. So yes, you're going to have to add some mileage, but just consider that like you damaging your nice car because you didn't want to walk a couple miles. I don't know, something to think about. But yeah, it depends. Those roads down there are generally rougher though, because again, that county does not do a ton of maintenance on Nelly Creek and Henson Creek in particular. Like the approach road, I think they tend to grade, but once you get into those individual ones, it's rough. Any non-14er class 3 climbs in the Front Range? Yes. Arapahoe, South Arapahoe are good. Those are up in IPW, Indian Peaks Wilderness. That's a really, really good one. We talk about like intro couloirs. Skywalker, definitely not intro, but as you kind of progress into more difficult couloirs, that's a really freaking fun one, because you can do Skywalker. And then there's variations to do, like, I think it's like Leia or whatever. It's all Star Wars shit, obviously. But then you can go do the scramble after. So it's kind of best of both worlds. But I will give you another answer of other things that I have in that area. What did you say? Class for non-14er class. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So there's a ton of stuff in the Gore range too. I'm not going to dig to get the book, but there's a Colorado Scrambles book that is, let me find it here. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's by CMC, Colorado Mountain Club. I'll drop it here in the chat. This is where, when I don't want to do 14ers, like I get a ton of my ideas from. Mount Neva, I just saw that. Yep, that's another great one. Helen, yep. Hot Pickles knows where it's at. Oh shoot, I just didn't drop this. What the hell? But yeah, this book is like, I hate to, whatever. There's not that many of you here, but I don't mean that negatively. I just mean like I'm not giving this to thousands and thousands of people. But this book is highly, highly, highly recommended. Really, really good. It's where I get a lot of my ideas from. Almost nothing in here is a 14er either. So definitely pick it up. And you support Colorado Mountain Club, which is a great organization as well. Aiden, I appreciate the question on tagging along. And let me just address this because I feel like people ask this a lot. Like, I struggle. I don't know how deep I want to get with this answer, but I'll just say, like, generally I struggle with doing things with other people, especially people that I don't know. So if I ever have a time where I decide to have like a group meetup, I'll definitely make it very public. But I think you asked earlier about like it's your question here. How to get in contact with other people who want to do similar stuff with. So I would definitely recommend checking out the forums on the 14ers site. Yes, it's called 14ers, but there's forums for all different kinds of objectives in there. So if you want to do backcountry stuff, 13ers, like, it's a great place to meet the community. If you don't want to do the forums, they have a Facebook group as well. Very similar format. And I don't mean this in like not wanting to hang out with you in particular or any of you in particular. It's just like, I don't know, it's just the way I kind of operate. I'm very awkward and uncomfortable with new people sometimes, even though I'm good at public speaking. So yeah, but I have had this request a bunch of like doing stuff, and it's kind of why I did the trail project of like being able to engage with people in person, which like is really awesome. Like, even just through the chat here, it's awesome to put a like person behind some of these questions. I know I'm obviously not seeing you all, but just to like have a real interaction is like awesome to me. But I just like kind of just struggle with like the actual in-person stuff. But there are definitely people out there who are actively looking for partners, like have like-minded things, like So yeah, those two resources, the 14ers Facebook group, if that's probably more 14ers centric, but if you go to 14ers.com and look in the forums there, there's always people looking for partners to do like all different kinds of stuff. And I have been trying to figure out a way, I think for a while, for people who like follow me to engage with each other. So that way there's like some kind of commonality there. I just don't really know the best way to do it. I've thought about Discord. So if you have ideas on like how to create that kind of community, definitely reach out because I would love to do it. I just like logistically don't know how to go about it. Gray asked, and I can't believe I'm going to stop probably around 2 hours because I got to eat dinner and stuff. But this has been awesome. I'll start doing these more. So I'll answer some more questions here. But if not, I'll definitely get to you next time. Gray asked, would I ever consider out-of-state hikes in Montana? Absolutely, man. Yeah, so I've been looking at, was that Grizzly up there, the high point in Montana, for a number of years. I am like really afraid of grizzlies. That's like the one animal that I just, it's like an alien to me. So doing stuff solo up in that area is not super appealing to me, but I think I'd love Glacier National Park. That's been on that trip of doing like Glacier up to Banff has been on my list forever. So we'll see. I mentioned going to Idaho this year. So I think maybe, we'll see how the year shakes out. If I don't do Idaho, it'll be Montana, but I definitely want to get up into that northern area again. But yeah, I would love to explore more of Montana. I admittedly have not enough experience there. Oh, Uncle Andy with the hot question here. Okay. Thoughts on Culebra and the ethics of tagging it? I know you've done it. And has your thought changed? Yeah, dude, it's a massive debate. And I think I need to keep some of my thoughts on certain people to myself because this is on the internet and I don't want to get myself in trouble. But I'll just say this. I do really struggle with mountains being owned by people. Having said that, I also understand that these people very clearly own these mountains. Not only Culebra, but Red, which is a Centennial 13er as well, is part of that. There's like many more 13ers that they own in that area. I'll be honest with my answer, which is like, if people are going to do that on their own, without paying the fee, I'm not going to like publicize what that looks like, but you can figure it out. You guys are all smart people. Do I think that's like the worst thing in the world? No. I don't think I would personally do it. I do think it's tough because like if you're paying like Quandary, I think their parking system is complete bullshit. But at least you're supporting something. Like you're supporting a town who's trying to have a better infrastructure. You're supporting a mountain. I'm hoping that, CFI, Colorado 14ers Initiative, sees some kind of money from that parking for like their trail work. That's just me being hopeful. But even if not, you're not supporting like an individual who owns a multi-million dollar ranch. Like they don't really need more money. But unfortunately, what I think has gone on a lot, especially with the 14ers. If you ask that question, Uncle Andy, you might be aware of the DeCalibron situation, the Lindsay situation. There's plenty of other, even Chavano, which has private land until very recently. And I think the issue there is like, as the owner of that land, if someone decides to sue you, which unfortunately there is a precedent for that, because they got injured, that could cost them their entire livelihood, their entire life. And then those multi-millions of dollars don't really mean as much. And unfortunately, there are shitty people out there who want to sue. So as a landowner, my amount of land is nothing compared to these people, but I do conceptually understand it. However, and this is Aria making an appearance here. However, I do really struggle with the concept of paying like 100, whatever it is, 150 to do something that they could definitely charge a lot less and just have you sign a waiver and call it a day. So it's tough. I think for people who are hunting the 14ers, like you have to answer that yourself. It goes back to kind of what I said earlier, which is like if you want to say you completed the 14ers and didn't do Calabria, is someone going to judge you? Probably. Do you really care about that person's opinion? I don't know. You have to answer that yourself. So, it's like the same people who ask me, like, do you count Blue Sky if you drove up to Summit Lake? It's like, I don't know, man. Like, you have to answer that yourself. Like, do you want to count it for yourself, or do you want to do the Bierstadt Sawtooth, or do you want to hike up from Echo Lake? Like, it's so subjective to the person. And I know I'm a little bit off topic with that question, but hot pickles. I know this. The comments here are just like dropping absolute heaters of good scrambles. So definitely recommend both of those that they said. And yeah, Nelly Creek has some dope camp. Like this, we talked. Someone asked about Uncompahgre and like Wetterhorn and those roads, and the roads are tough, but the camping situations there, if you get a good spot, it can be some of the best that I've had. So definitely good stuff. Thank you for the Rex, Andy, too. I'll check those out. All right. Have I done Mount Whitney? Corey, great. Why am I saying great? Great question. Yes, I have. I did it in a day. I did. There's a video. You can find it very easily. I did the Mountaineers route up and the standard route down. I was on furlough at the time for my job, so I was able to just like snag a permit. I didn't do like the pre-permit system. I would say like my recommendation for these pre-permits, especially like Half Dome or Whitney or any of the really, really popular ones, they do the initial window, and then throughout the year, people cancel. They release more. So if you have like a certain day or time you want to do something, refresh those things. And there's a high chance those things being the website where you buy it, the permit. Definitely check it out because it's not easy, but it's not as hard as like getting the initial lottery to get some of these permits for these things. And then just quickly on Whitney, amazing. I want to get back to the Sierras very, very bad. Really, really enjoyed Whitney. I would say the exception would be if you're going to do Mountaineers route, you want snow. It's just not enjoyable without it. The scrambling there is like mediocre at best. The rock quality is shitty at best. So with snow, I think it would be a much more enjoyable time. Having said that, if you're doing Mountaineers with snow, you're probably going down Mountaineers, so it's going to look like a different day. You can definitely do the Mountaineers route dry. Just personally, if I had to do it again, I would do Mountaineers with snow. It'd just be a much more enjoyable snow climb. Yeah, the DeCalibron's another tough one. I have like DeCalibron and Mount Lindsay, like the DeCalibron in general, I know is open again, so that's great. Mount Lindsay is still closed for those of you who are, looking at things. But the DeCalibron is it's a tough pill to swallow. That one has a very, very lengthy history. There, if you can pull up, if you have, again, I'm plugging something that I've used in the past, but if you have an app like Onyx or Gaia, I think has it too, you can look at land ownership in that. And it's crazy how many different parcels of land there are on the DeCalibron in general because of all the mining claims. And it's just like really disheartening that the summit's still closed because from what I've heard, they can't even get a hold of the people who own the land. So it's not like they say no. It's like they can't even get the written yes. So it's like this weird purgatory that they find themselves in. And honestly, like the DeCalibron is ass to me. Like it's sure if you're looking to do 4 in a day, cool, it's great. But like the trail conditions are really, really bad. CFI is working on them. I know maybe that's where we'll end up doing the trail work this year. But it's like it's just like not like a really great hike in my opinion. So it's like one of those ones where it's like if you're hunting the 14ers, you do it, but I don't feel like you're revisiting the DeCalibron for fun. It's I don't know, just me. All right, we got about 10 minutes left. I love these questions, man. Summit something. Can you comment on this cardboard summit signs that get discarded? Yeah, I can definitely comment on them. I okay. I don't care what people do on the mountain as long as you're bringing whatever your shit is. If it's a cardboard sign, if you're doing whatever your shtick is, just like bring it out with you. The fact that they get left there is like really stupid. Because how much does this weigh? It weighs nothing. I scared the dog with that. So yeah, I mean, I don't care about the cardboard signs. I think I've probably done them before. I haven't made one, but if like there was one there, I maybe picked it up. So I don't know. Like they're whatever. Whatever you're bringing, if you want to do that, like it's cool, but like just bring it out with you. And that applies to everything. Leave no trace wise. If you're having a tangerine, don't throw it on the ground. It drives me bananas. Banana peels too. Pun. So yeah, just leave no trace. That's my quick rant on that. Yeah. Rugged Land makes an interesting point, talking about paying $150 to do Lindsay. Yeah, and I think that's really challenging. Like, I think people would pay and they would sign a waiver. Like, I think it's an easy solution. I think a lot of these landowners, and frankly, I don't know, I don't need to rant about my thoughts on the government, but like sometimes it's just easy to have a blanket solution that just fixes everything. And maybe it's not the most creative or the most innovative, but it just like solves the problem in the easiest way. And so I think for Lindsay or for some of these private lands situations, like shutting down the mountain, that's the easiest way to do it, unfortunately. Do people climb Lindsay still? I'm sure they do. Yeah, like I'm just like people tag Bros, just like people, go and do Culebra on their own. Again, I can't answer that question if like you should do that or not. Yeah, it's trespassing. If you get caught, it's probably not very good for you. But I can't comment on like whether you should do that or not. Okay, I got a couple questions left. I'm sorry, I'm running out of steam here. But first of all, just thank you all for joining. I thought this went really well. Thank you for supporting, for watching, for whatever you're doing. I really appreciate it. Shameless plug to my Patreon. If you want to kind of do these, I have a Patreon where I'll answer questions a lot more directly. I can help you plan a trip, all that fun stuff. So check that out. I have gear as well. I try to price it as low as I can. There are like prices to creating things, obviously, especially with stickers. If you guys don't want to pay shipping, the shipping situation on my store is like a flat fee because of the actual gear, like the shirts and hoodies and stuff. Like that company charges me for shipping, so I have to pass it on to you all. But if you want to do stickers, like I have those sitting here and just ship those out individually. So if you ever want to buy those and don't want to pay shipping, just let me know and we can figure something out. But yeah, just thanks for joining tonight. I thought this went really well, so I appreciate you all. And I'll answer like a couple more questions here, and then we'll call it a night. Yeah, Aiden, props on the Utah Rex. Like, there's so many slot canyons that I want to do in Utah as well. So, and I've heard Coyote, which is on my list. So it sounds, I feel like Utah is like prime this time of year, where if you don't ski or snowboard or do winter stuff, like you head to Utah and it's like a really safe time to do it because you're not worried about flash floods and all that fun stuff. And it's just colder, so you're not like dying in the temps. Do I have plans to do the North Buttress up El Diente? No, I actually haven't heard of that before, so I'll have to check that out. Is that what's the class of that? If I'm understanding that verbiage, it sounds like a roped up situation. Is that true? Well, that answer's maybe being answered or not. Yeah, like I think that's a prime fourth class. Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds dope. Like I said, I was just back down, and I think it's got to be Gladstone. That's right there. I feel like my brain gets mushed after a while. Yeah, Gladstone Peak is what I did this summer, or fall, I should say. So yeah, and I was looking over at like El Deontay Wilson and was like thinking how it would be fun to go do those again. So yeah, I'll have to check it out. And I think those are like there's I forget the route up Crestone Needle too, which is like a 5th class route. But those are the kind of examples. Whoever asked about doing like more rock climbing stuff, like that's the kind of stuff I'd like to do where it's part of the objective. You know, you're climbing, like that sounds fun to me versus just like going and climbing in Clear Creek or something like that. Like that's not really something I'd ever make into content. But all right, I'll give a couple minutes here just for any last questions. But again, these were some great questions. I appreciate it. There wasn't anyone really trolling tonight, so I always appreciate that. And yeah, thanks for just supporting. I really, really appreciate it. I love doing stuff like this. For those of you who have joined later, just again, if you want to do any kind of like meeting up in person, is what I'm trying to say. I'll be doing another trail work project with CFI, Colorado 14ers Initiative, this summer. So I'll be posting everywhere about that once we do it. So yeah, just be on the lookout for that. But all right, I'll call it a night. I'm going to go watch Surviving Barstool, the latest episode. But thank you all. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great night. Good luck with your 2025 objectives. And yeah, we'll do this again soon. So appreciate y'all. Take care.